This is the story of how a simple coffee order changed two lives forever. The story of a billionaire in disguise, a waitress named Julia, and a note that carried a secret capable of destroying an entire family, or saving an innocent person. And I promise you, once you understand the reason behind that note, this story will move you deeply. Have you ever lived a moment so small, so ordinary, that no one would ever imagine it was hiding an entire destiny? Sometimes it's exactly in those moments that life whispers our greatest turning point. On that cold morning in Boston, Julia was working as always, serving tables, smiling at strangers, trying to stay calm despite life's challenges. She was simple, genuine, the kind of rare person who carries kindness in her gestures and strength in her silence. That's when a man walked into the cafe. An old coat, unshaven face, slow steps. He looked tired, invisible, almost forgotten by the world. But there was something about him that didn't match that appearance. That stranger was Logan Sterling, one of the most influential billionaires in the United States, trying to go unnoticed. He ordered only a coffee, and while she prepared it, Julia noticed a terrifying detail, something that made her take an impulsive and dangerous decision. When she handed him the coffee, she left a folded note along with it, hidden in the palm of her hand. Logan took it without question. But when he opened it, his expression changed. Inside the note, there was a sentence Julia should never have known, a sentence that exposed something dark, something someone powerful was trying to hide. It didn't just reveal a secret, it put Julia in danger. And right there in that humble cafe, their destinies became forever intertwined. Before I tell you why Julia gave him that note and what Logan was really hiding, I want to kindly ask you to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. This story will hold you from beginning to end. And the question that remains is, how did Julia discover that secret? And why was the billionaire in disguise that day? Julia woke up every day at 5:30 in the morning. The old alarm clock, bought at a thrift shop in Boston, rang with a metallic sound that filled the small room where she lived. The walls were simple, but covered with post-its she wrote herself so she wouldn't forget who she wanted to be. Kindness is strength. Keep going, even when you're tired. Good always returns. She repeated those sentences as if they were prayers. She worked at Beacon Street Coffee, a small and cozy cafe constantly filled with students, tourists, and rushed workers. It wasn't the job of her dreams, but it was honest, and it was a place where she felt she could make a difference. Julia always believed that every person who walked up to the counter carried a story no one could see. That's why she smiled. That's why she helped. That's why she never treated anyone with hurry. And deep down, that was what made her stand out the most. Julia saw people where the world saw only motion. Her life had never been easy. She had lived alone since she was 17, after her mother fell ill and had to move in with distant relatives. Julia stayed. She worked. She fought. She learned to survive. And despite all the difficulties, she never let hardship erase her gentleness. Of course, she had dreams, studying nursing, maybe opening her own small cafe one day, but for now, she was simply trying to keep all the bills paid. And even so, she never refused help to anyone. If a customer didn't have enough money, she offered an accidental discount. If someone came in sad, she left a motivational note with their order. It was as if the world was too heavy to go without at least one gesture of light. Her coworkers said she was too good, but not in a flattering tone. They said it as criticism, as if kindness were the same as weakness. Julia just smiled. She believed that what we do comes back, It always comes back. That morning, the morning that would change everything, she arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. She put on her blue apron, tied her hair, took a deep breath and opened the curtains, letting the soft winter light seep in. The silence of the place almost felt like it wanted to talk to her. While organizing the tables, she noticed that one of the little notes she always kept near the coffee machine had fallen to the floor. It was one of her favorites. Life watches over pure hearts. She slipped it into her pocket, unaware that those words would return like an echo hours later. The morning rush started slowly, smiling customers, irritable ones, indifferent ones. She treated them all the same, with calm, with attention, with that gentle way of hers that made people breathe better without realizing it. Until, through the cafe window, she saw a man standing across the street. Old coat, slow steps, tired eyes. He looked like an ordinary person, maybe lost in his own life. But Julia felt, without understanding why, there was something unusual about him. A presence, a weight, a different kind of silence. She didn't know it yet, but that man and that day would be the beginning of everything. The mystery, the note, and the turning point that would change her story forever. The cafe was getting crowded when the man finally walked in. Julia recognized him immediately. He was the same one who had been standing on the other side of the street, looking down as if carrying the weight of a world no one else could see. He walked in slowly, like someone afraid of disturbing others. The simple coat, the slightly trembling hands, the short and poorly kept beard. His appearance said he was just someone trying to survive Boston's harsh winter. But there was something in his eyes, a quiet, observant depth. As if, behind that tired face, there was a man who had seen far too much. Julia felt her heart tighten, not out of pity, but empathy. It was automatic for her. She felt people. She couldn't ignore it. "Good morning," she said, with that smile that warmed more than any cup of coffee. The man nodded without lifting his eyes too much. "A coffee, please. Black. No sugar." Just that. He spoke little, observed a lot. When Julia went to prepare the order, she noticed he never took his hands out of his pockets, as if he were cold or afraid. Something about him seemed to hide from the world, not just because of the humble appearance, but because of the almost calculated silence. She placed the coffee on the counter and, before calling him, set down a small package of fresh bread. There were a few left from the morning batch. She pushed the plate discreetly. "It's on the house," she said, trying to sound casual. "It's really cold today." The man lifted his eyes for the first time, and Julia saw in that instant a mix of surprise and suspicion, as if kindness were something too rare to be accepted without explanation. "You don't need to," he murmured. "I know," she replied, smiling, "but I want to." There was a soft, almost beautiful silence. A simple gesture, but one that crossed something inside him. The man picked up the coffee carefully. His hands were cold, trembling slightly. When he touched the bread package, his fingers hesitated, as if it meant more than just food. As if it had been far too long since someone had offered him something without wanting anything in return. "What's your name?" he asked, still not understanding the reason for the kindness. "Julia," she replied. He opened his mouth to say something, but only nodded again. Julia walked away, believing she had only done what her heart told her to do. A simple gesture, small, without expectations. To her, it was just another day being who she always was. But to him, for that man the world judged by his appearance, that gesture lit something that had been extinguished for a long time. While he drank the coffee slowly, Julia had no idea she had just helped someone who didn't need money, but humanity. And she couldn't imagine that this small act of kindness would be the very reason why, hours later, she would risk everything to deliver a dangerous note. A simple gesture, a sincere kindness, the first step towards a bond that would change both their destinies. The cafe was getting busier, and Julia continued her shift with her usual lightness until she noticed that some coworkers were watching the man she had served. Whispers, side glances, discreet giggles. Samantha, the oldest waitress, crossed her arms and made a comment loud enough for everyone to hear. There she is, always adopting some poor stray. The sound of the dishes barely covered the provocation. Julia took a deep breath, pretending she hadn't heard. She was already used to that kind of thing, but it never stopped hurting. Seriously, Samantha insisted, stepping closer. You keep giving free food to anyone. The owner is going to think you're wasting inventory. The manager, Mark, who rarely missed a chance to belittle someone, appeared right behind her. What is it this time, Julia? He frowned, looking straight at the man sitting in the corner. Brought another homeless guy inside? Julia felt her face heat up. She looked at the man, quiet, hunched over, trying not to draw attention. She looked back at Mark. He's a customer, Julia said calmly, like any other. Mark let out a mocking laugh. A customer, with that coat that looks like it came out of the trash? Some customers turned to look at the scene. The man lowered his eyes even further, ashamed. Anger rose inside Julia like a silent fire. Show him some respect, she said firmly. You don't know people's stories. Mark stepped closer, speaking low, but with venom in his voice. The problem is that you always think you can save the world, acting like some kind of saint. This is a cafe, Julia, not a social shelter. Samantha added, one day she'll learn that being too nice only brings trouble. Julia felt a knot form in her throat, but she didn't blink. She wouldn't cry in front of them. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I only offered bread that would have been thrown away. It didn't cost anyone anything. Mark rolled his eyes. Don't argue with me. If you keep coming up with this nonsense, it's going to fall on you. The threat hung in the air. Heavy, unfair, cruel. Julia returned to the counter with slow steps, trying to pull herself together. While drying a glass, she felt the man approach with respectful silence. Sorry, he murmured. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Julia lifted her gaze and smiled, even though she was hurt. You didn't cause any trouble. People just sometimes don't understand. His eyes, so observant and deep, stayed on her for a few seconds, as if recording each gesture, each word. The world needs more people like you, he said softly. And he went back to his table. It was then Julia noticed something strange. Mark was watching the two of them, not with anger, but with suspicion, as if he believed there was something there he wasn't understanding. And when small-minded people don't understand, they attack. Julia didn't know it yet, but that small act of kindness and that small moment of defending someone would be used against her in just a few hours. The injustice was only beginning, and life, once again, would test everything she believed in. The afternoon had barely begun when the atmosphere at Blue Harbor changed. Julia noticed it first in the silence, that strange silence that appears when something bad is about to happen. Samantha was whispering with two coworkers near the kitchen, and Mark, the manager, paced back and forth, far too restless for an ordinary day. Julia continued her work, trying to ignore the heavy feeling in her chest. She served tables, collected dishes, smiled at customers. But it was a tired smile, the kind that holds the soul together so it doesn't fall apart. That was when Mark called her. Julia, my office, now. Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't common for Mark to use that tone. She wiped her hands on her apron and entered the small, cramped office where papers were piled up and the smell of old cigarette smoke clung to everything. Mark closed the door slowly, his expression tense. "I received a complaint. They say you're giving free food to people who aren't customers." Julia swallowed hard. "The bread would have been thrown away. It doesn't matter," he interrupted, raising his voice. "You don't have permission to give anything without authorization." She tried to breathe deeply. "Mark, I was just trying to be kind. He paid for the coffee. I didn't do anything wrong." The manager walked to the desk, grabbed a paper, and tossed it in her direction. "Kindness doesn't pay the cafe's bills, and honestly, I'm tired of your habit of trying to look better than everyone else here." The words hit like knives. "That's not it," she murmured. "I've decided." Mark crossed his arms. "You're fired." The floor seemed to disappear beneath her. The sounds from the street, the noise of the cafe, everything became distant, muffled, as if the world were happening behind a closed door. "Fired?" Her voice came out low, broken. "For giving away a piece of bread?" Mark didn't even blink. "For disobeying and for causing problems in the workplace. Hand over your apron and leave now." Julia felt her face burn, but she held back the tears with all her strength. She wasn't going to cry in front of him. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. "I understand," she managed to say. When she opened the door, Samantha and the others were already watching, some with discreet smiles, others pretending to feel sorry. The man with the coat, the one she had helped, observed everything in silence, with a heavy, almost somber gaze, as if witnessing something that shouldn't be happening. Julia walked to the counter, took off her apron slowly and folded it with care. The cafe felt different now, cold, strange, as if the place that had always been her small home had decided to throw her out without looking at her heart. She stepped outside, the freezing wind cutting her face. As soon as she turned the corner, the tears finally fell. Heavy, hot, full of pain and helplessness. "I was just trying to do good," she whispered to herself. On that gray afternoon in Seattle, Julia felt that the world didn't reward kindness. She felt small, alone, lost. And she had no idea that her fall was only the prelude to the greatest turning point of her life. Julia walked down the street as if she were trapped inside a bad dream. Seattle's fog looked thicker, the wind sharper, and each step hurt as if the world were pressing down on her shoulders. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stay warm, but the cold wasn't only coming from outside, it was coming from within. She didn't know where to go. The cafe was her job, and also the place she lived. With no warning, no preparation, nothing, she was alone. She sat on a nearby bench, trying to steady her breathing. The tears had already dried, but her chest remained heavy, as if something inside her was about to burst. That was when she heard footsteps. Julia. She turned slowly. The man with the humble coat was standing there, just a few meters away. Something about him looked different, his gaze steadier, his posture stronger, as if the humble way he had walked into the cafe earlier had just been a shadow. "Are you okay?" he asked, taking a step forward. Julia wiped her face quickly. "Sorry, you didn't need to see that. I'm fine. It was just a hard day." He watched her for a few seconds, with a silence that seemed to understand more than any word could. Then he took a deep breath. "That shouldn't have happened." His voice carried a new weight. "You were wronged." Julia let out an awkward, small smile, trying to minimize it. "It happens. Not everyone understands that kindness isn't waste." The man seemed to reflect on that, as if storing something important. "You didn't deserve that," he repeated. She stood, ready to leave, but he lifted a hand, as if asking for just one more moment. And that's when everything changed. A long, black, gleaming limousine approached slowly along the narrow street. Its contrast against the gray weather was so striking it looked like a movie scene. It stopped beside them with perfect smoothness, and before Julia could understand what she was seeing, a very well-dressed chauffeur stepped out quickly. "Mr. Sterling?" he called respectfully. "Everything is ready." Julia froze. The man in the humble coat looked at her with an expression full of truth. "My name is Logan Sterling. I'm not who I appear to be." Julia's world spun. Sterling. The surname echoed inside her like thunder. It was a familiar name. One of the biggest private investors in the country, owner of companies, properties, and projects she had only ever seen in news reports. I don't understand," Julia whispered. Logan removed the old coat. Underneath it, a discreet, expensive, perfectly tailored shirt. The scruffy beard, the exhaustion, everything seemed like part of a disguise. "This morning, I just wanted to see how people treat someone who has nothing to offer, and you were the only one who saw me as a human being." Julia blinked, stunned. "But why?" He gave a small smile. A sad one. "Because a person's character only shows when no one is watching, and you showed yours." The chauffeur opened the limousine door. "Sir, please." Logan extended his hand to her. "Julia, come with me. I need to show you something, and you deserve to hear the whole truth." Her heart raced. The cold outside disappeared. The pain from being fired faded. Something new, frightening and bright began to rise. The turning point had finally begun, and Julia's life would never be the same. The limousine door closed softly behind Julia, and the world outside seemed to vanish. The interior was quiet, warm, carrying that faint scent of new leather and calm. Julia could barely understand what was happening. Her heart raced, her hands trembled, her thoughts collided with each other. Logan sat beside her, still with that serene calm that completely contrasted with the weary man from the cafe. "Julia, I'm sorry for everything that happened," he began. "You didn't deserve to be treated that way." She looked out the window, trying to take everything in. "I just did what anyone would do," she murmured. "No," Logan replied immediately, firmly. "It's not what anyone would do, and that's exactly why you're here." The limousine crossed through Seattle until it stopped in front of an elegant glass tower, more than 30 floors high. The facade shimmered as if made of light. Julia felt her breath leave her. "This is where I want to show you something," he said as he stepped out of the car. The chauffeur opened her door with care. Julia stepped out, glancing around, completely out of place. They entered the lobby, and suddenly every gaze turned toward Logan. Security guards greeted him with respect. Employees addressed him as Mr. Sterling, and he simply walked beside Julia. In the elevator, he finally explained, "This is the headquarters of Sterling Enterprises. And today, you're here because you need to understand the impact of what you did." She looked out the window, trying to take everything in. When they reached the 28th floor, Logan guided her into a large, quiet room. There were huge windows, meeting tables, and a few screens displaying news and financial reports. Logan stopped in front of her. "I was in disguise," he said honestly. "Not because I wanted to test people, but because I was tired of hypocrisy, flattery, ulterior motives. I needed to remember what it felt like to be treated like an ordinary human being. And you saw me." Julia lowered her gaze, feeling her heart tighten. I just gave you coffee and bread. You gave me humanity, something I hadn't received in years. He took a deep breath before continuing. I want to make you an offer, Julia. Not out of pity, not out of charity, but because very few people have the heart you have, and I need people like that by my side. She swallowed hard. What kind of offer? Logan opened a folder on the table. Inside was a simple, clear, elegant contract. I want to hire you personally, not as a waitress, not as a regular assistant, but as part of a new social project I'm creating. A real project, serious, big, inspired by you. She froze. By me? He smiled. Yes, I want you to help lead a program that supports people who go unseen in this world. You have the kind of perception that many leaders lack. You notice what others overlook. Julia felt her eyes fill with tears. Her chest, so hurt just hours earlier, now felt like it was opening as if she were breathing for the first time. Logan, I don't know if I deserve something like this. He stepped a little closer. You deserve more than you realize. And in that moment, Julia finally cried, but this time not from pain, from gratitude, from relief, from justice. Life was giving back everything she had put into the world, and it was giving it back twice over. The following months felt as if they had come from another time. The social project envisioned by the man in the humble coat was growing. Community cafes, courses, support programs, everything taking shape. And at the center of this movement was Julia, no longer the ignored waitress from the Blue Harbor, but the woman who turned empathy into concrete action. As her life blossomed, the truth finally imposed itself. The manager who had cowardly fired her was reported for old, unethical conduct. The waitresses who mocked Julia lost their jobs in other cafes as well, and discovered, in the hardest way, that life does not reward cruelty disguised as a joke. No tragedies, only consequence. The door they closed on her closed on them as well. Meanwhile, Julia went in the opposite direction, growing, maturing, winning. She learned to lead teams, heard deep stories, organized initiatives that changed lives. What began with a piece of bread offered with kindness multiplied into hundreds of real opportunities for those who needed a new beginning. The pain of being fired became strength. Injustice became purpose. Fragility became light. Months later, during the inauguration of yet another community center, Julia stepped onto the stage. Among the audience was Logan, now with a firmer posture, a more confident expression, and eyes that silently thanked the day she offered him coffee and humanity. Julia took a deep breath, held the microphone, and said, "Life taught me that kindness is practice. It's not pretty speech, it's daily action." The audience fell into a deep silence, listening to every word. Sometimes the reward comes in open doors, sometimes in people who cross our path, and sometimes it comes in the form of meaning, the meaning we return to the world. She smiled, and some people wiped away tears. Doing good has consequence, just as doing harm does too. Every choice is a seed, and no seed fails to bear fruit. As she stepped off the stage, Julia was greeted by friends, by people she had helped, by families rebuilt thanks to her work. She had found her place in the world, not because of wealth, but because of purpose. Years later, Julia built a beautiful family and chose to live in Brooklyn Heights, New York, a calm neighborhood with tree-lined streets, historic facades, and a view of Manhattan, a place that seemed to speak to her soul, welcoming, strong, and quietly beautiful. The moral that remained was clear. Life observes, life returns, and no one harvests differently from what they plant. Julia then looked at the camera, or at whomever might be listening, and left the final question. And you, what small gesture can you make today that might change someone's destiny? Write it in the comments. Share this video so that this story reaches someone who may really need to hear it today. And if this story touched your heart, don't miss the next one. It's already appearing on your screen now. Click to watch.